sat quietly chanting on his japa beads as he leaned casually on the front steps of the temple. Unsure of the etiquette, I greeted him with a Hare Krishna and asked him if I could meet the Guru, Srila Prabhupada. Naively, I'd assumed he'd be there, but Janakinath Das summarily informed me that ISKCON was an international society and Srila Prabhupada had to travel all over the world to maintain it and was presently in India. When he saw my disappointment, however, he quickly added that Srila Prabhupada's association could be perfectly had by reading his books. Janakinath's answer satisfied me because, to some degree, I'd already perceived this for myself. I happily followed him into the fragrant atmosphere of the San Francisco temple, which was soon to become my home. Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki. Jai Jai Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Caitanya Pishashki. Reading from Sri Caitanya Charitamrta, Madhya chapter 19, and the title of the Lord instructs Srila Rupa Goswami. Does anybody know which verse we were on last? Okay, we'll start from here. Prema phala pakipade male asvadaya lata avalambi male kalpa vrikapaya. Translation: when the fruit of devotional service becomes ripe and falls down, the gardener tastes the fruit and thus takes advantage of the creeper and reaches the desire tree of the lotus feet of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. Text 163. Tan se kalpa vrikera karaye sevana sukhi prema phala rasa kariya swadana. There the devotee serves the lotus feet of the Lord, which are compared to a wish-fulfilling tree. With great bliss, he tastes the juice of the fruit of love and becomes eternally happy. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The word tahan indicates that in the spiritual world one can taste the juice of the fruit of devotion service and thus become blissful. And we'll do this one, everybody. Eta paramaphala paramapurushartha. Eta paramaphala paramapurushartha. Yandra age trina tulya chari purushartha. Yandra age trina tulya chari purushartha. Eta parama phala parama purushartha. Yandra age trina tulya chari purushartha. Eta parama phala parama purushartha. Yandra age trina tulya chari purushartha. Please chant. Eta parama phala parama purushartha. Yandra age trina. Eta parama phala parama purushartha. Yandra age trina tulya chari purushartha. Eta parama phala parama purushartha. Yana Agitila Hari Purushakta. Heta Paramapala Purama Purusharta. Yanra Agitrina Tulya Chari Purusharta. Heta. This Paramaphala, the supreme goal of life. Parama, supreme. Purusha Artha, interest of the living being. Yanra Age, in the presence of which Trina Tulya, very significant. Chari, for Purusha Artha, the different types of human interests. Translation: to taste the fruit of devotional service in Goloka Vrindavan is the highest perfection of life. And in the presence of such perfection, the four material perfections, religion, economic development, sense gratification, liberation, are very insignificant achievements. Please repeat. To taste the fruit of devotional service in Goloka Vrindavan is the highest perfection of life. And in the presence of such perfection, the four material perfections, religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, are very insignificant achievements. Srila Prabhupada's purport: the highest achievement attained by the Gyanis or impersonalists is becoming one with the Supreme, generally known as moksha, liberation. The highest achievements of the yogis are the 8 material perfections, such as anima, lagima, and prapti. Yet these are nothing compared to the eternal bliss of the devotee who returns back to Godhead and tastes the fruit of devotional service to the lotus feet of the Lord. The material perfections, even up to the point of liberation, are very insignificant in comparison. Therefore, the pure devotee is never interested in such things. His only interest is in perfecting his devotional service to the Lord. The pleasure of impersonalist, monist philosophers is condemned in the following verse, which is also found in Srila Bhru Goswami's Leela Madhava. So that will be later. Om Jnana Shyanjana Slakaya Chakshurmilitamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vakam Kroti Vachalam Bhangam Lagate Girim Yatkripatamam Vande Shri Girim Dinataran Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasagora Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So just following on from the instructions being given to Rupa Goswami, Lord Caitanya is talking about how to cultivate the creeper of devotional service and how to avoid watering the weeds. The effect of chanting Hare Krishna when we're still maintaining material desires, sometimes it gives us more potency to enjoy materially as well. So we have to be careful of that, because especially in the beginning stages when we're taking to devotional service, taking to chanting, sometimes we're chanting and we become inattentive, and then we become aware of our desires, and then we start to conjure up ideas of how we can actually be successful with them. So these are the flowery words of the Vedas. We've been attracted to some karma, kanda type thing, or using the holy name as if it's going to bring some material benefit, which would be which offense? 8th. Yeah, which is yeah. It also does include the 10th, because maintaining material attachments, even after hearing so many instructions, there's so many of them interlinked actually, and they all come from one thing: inattentiveness. So sometimes we think these 10 offenses don't really apply to us because we don't think that the chanting of the holy name is there for material benefit, but yet still in our heart we desire some material benefit. So we may understand theoretically, or we may think, oh well, you understand we shouldn't chant the holy name as some kind of interpreting in some way, or thinking the glories of imagination. But sometimes we become doubtful, thinking, oh, I've been chanting and I'm not getting the nectar, and then we start to doubt like that. But we shouldn't doubt it, because we're just learning. There's other devotees who are more adept at chanting. They've learned the science of devotional service. They've learned the science of chanting with love and with full attention. And we can see that they're actually reaping the results. So we may not personally be experiencing, a high degree of ecstasy or nectar, but we can see in others that they're experiencing that. So the process works. And if we follow in their footsteps, Mahajana Yena Gatasa Panta, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, then we also will get to that point, just as they were following the footsteps of their predecessor, they also got there. So this process of devotional service, when we're very careful with it, then it works. And sometimes we're not so careful, and then we may find ourselves in some kind of trouble. And the devotees out of their kindness point that out so that we can become aware of it and then do something about it. This is Krishna's mercy. So sometimes the devotees here, led by Hoksha Krishna Prabhu, they perform some different dramas, some dramatic sketches, or skits as they call them. And he does one called Krishna's Mercy. And if you don't know the story, I'll just quickly tell it anyway for those who do. As that the king has a minister called Birbal who's very intelligent, but he speaks quite plainly. So, what was it? Yeah, so first of all, the king, he comes back from some skirmish he had with another king. They were in some battle, and he came back and he cut part of his finger off. And Birbal says, oh, Krishna's mercy. And the king didn't appreciate it because he was in pain. So he said, oh, Krishna's mercy. He says, is everything's Krishna's mercy? Yes. Okay, if I throw you in my deepest, darkest dungeon, smelliest dungeon, is that Krishna's mercy? He says, all Krishna's mercy. So the devotees sometimes they may say like that, but we don't see it. In due course of time, after some experience, generally hindsight, like Caitanya Maharaj says, he was once asked, can you see God? He says, I've seen the hand of God. So seeing the hand of God is seeing God. And that's generally in retrospect. We're maybe going through something, we don't see Krishna's hand at the time, but we look back and think, well, Krishna was actually kind to me, although I thought it was some adverse situation. So if the devotees continue with their regular practice and continue in the devotional mood, whatever comes, then if we continue with it, then we make progress. So in that way, everything's Krishna's mercy. So anyway, Birbal was in the dungeon, and the king generally goes out hunting at some point, and he usually takes Birbal with him, but this time he went alone. He went into the jungle to hunt. Sometimes the Kshatriyas would do this. They would go and fight with tigers. Even, I think it was the beginning of the 20th century, there was some picture of some guy who'd went and faced a tiger in the jungle, and they had these big knives. They would strap them onto their arm, so it would come out like that, and then go face to face with the tiger, and then they would try to compete with the tiger or pitch themselves against the tiger. So this was considered the test of a Kshatriya, not that they dig a hole and then from 2 miles away they shoot a little bullet at somebody. So this was courage. Not saying that modern day Kshatriyas aren't courageous, but it's certainly a different type of training they had back in the day. So anyway, the king went hunting, and while he was hunting, there was someone, tribe had fired a poisoned dart at him, which paralyzed him. And these were man-eating people. They were cannibals. So as they were just getting them ready to put them in the pot for cooking, then they were checking, because generally they would offer to the goddess Kali. Not that Kali accepts, but sometimes we see in the 5th canto also Jad Bharat was about to be offered to Kali. And Kali came off the altar and protected him because he was a pure devotee. This is the best type of self-defense, that you depend on Krishna. Sometimes people, they learn how to do boxing, weightlifting and kung fu and all that kind of stuff. That means you're completely dependent on your own strength, but there's always someone bigger, faster than you. And I had one friend who was a black belt in Taekwondo, and he wasn't a troublemaker, but there was another troublemaker once caught him in a lift in the town centre and wanted to ask him to a fight. But my friend, he was smart enough to know that, okay, I might know so much here, but if he gets the first hit in, then I'm finished. So he declined. So that was also the first thing, is try to avoid. Kshatras try to avoid. They don't just, as soon as there's trouble, they just climb in there. They try to use diplomacy, etc., just like in Kurukshetra. They tried all sorts of things, and finally there was no option. So that's one type of self-defense. Another one is that sometimes they pray to a particular personality, like Hanuman or something, Lord Nrsingadev, so that they can become courageous. Another one is they don't actually defend themselves and leave it to the Lord. Mari Krishna Rakike, Raki Krishna Marike. If Krishna wants to protect me, who will kill me? And if Krishna wants to kill me, who can protect me? Can anyone give an example of each of those? Or one of them? That's true. When Lord Nrsingadev had decided he was going to kill Hiranyakashipu, that was it. Even more so with Kamsa. Kamsa tried so many things. He sent so many demons to Vrindavan. They tried to kill Krishna, but nothing worked. And so this is the situation. So anyway, the king was in the pot. He was just getting ready to get put in the pot, and then he noticed that the tip of his finger had been cut off. In order to offer to the goddess Kali, then the body has to be complete. There can't be any broken limbs. It's not like sometimes we get some scabby vegetables from the market and we cut the bit off and we offer it. You can't offer scabby humans to the goddess Kali. They have to be complete. He only had 9.5 fingers. So then they had to let him go. Okay, you're no use for the offering, off you go. So then he got back to his palace and he let Birbal out. And he says, "Oh, you were right, Birbal, Krishna's mercy that I got my tip of my finger cut off." He says, "I didn't see it at the time, but you were right." He says, "But how is it Krishna's mercy that you were in the dungeon? You accepted that as Krishna's mercy?" He says, "Well, normally I go hunting with you. If I'd have been there, I'd have been in the pot." So Krishna is so intelligent, he does so many things in one go that we can't conceive of how many things he's doing. And we simply have to be patient. So here in this this chapter here, it's being explained as to how we patiently have to carefully chant, carefully protect the Bhakti-lata Bij, especially from Vaishnava Parad. Krishna is particularly unhappy when the devotees are fighting with each other. He doesn't like that. And so we have to avoid that at all costs. We always have to maintain a respectful attitude towards the devotees. Even if they're sometimes not so respectful to us, we still have to do that because that is up to us. That is our lot. So when the devotional service becomes ripe and falls down, so the fruit, the devotional service falls down. So basically, when in due course of time, by watering the tree's roots, by pruning it carefully, pruning off the dead wood, etc., and by nourishing with different fertilizers, then in due course of time, when the fruit's ready, then it will fall. You can't take it prematurely. If you take it prematurely, just like last night, we went to the Edinburgh Hindu Mandir and we had a very nice Caitanya program. and there was quite a lot of people there. Some of them were there from 10 o'clock right through till 5 o'clock, reciting the whole Bhagavad Gita. And some of them came a bit later. And at the end of it, there was some maha fruits to give out, and there were some very nice looking fruits there, some exotic fruits. But although it looked nice, it wasn't ripe. Typical Kali Yuga. Things look the part, but they don't. And it was very bitter, but had it been left for just a little while longer, it would have been sweet. So if we try to harvest the fruits of devotional service before they're fully ripened, before they come of their own accord, see, we're talking about the fruits were falling, so this means that of its own accord, when it's ripe, it will fall into our lap. If we try to push it, then what happens, that impatience will lead us to a different result. Then we risk becoming sahaja or pretender, someone who pretends that they're more advanced than they really are, either through exhibiting some kind of fake ecstasy or exhibiting realizations which they don't really have. So we have to be careful, because when we preach about certain things which we don't realize, then Krishna gives us the opportunity to realize them. Often when devotees give class, later that day they find themselves trying to learn the same lesson they were speaking about. It's quite amazing. And often when the devotees are giving class, they're preaching to themselves. So Krishna's lotus feet are compared to a wish-fulfilling tree. Now, Srila Prabhupada explains this in the Brahma Samhita. It's been described that in the material world, a tree can only give the fruits which it can supply. So an apple tree won't give bananas. A pear tree won't give mangoes. It can only give what it's supposed to. But in the spiritual world, any tree can give any variety or any amount of fruit. It's not like, okay, it's giving the fruits, we need to wait for another year before it gives fruits again. No, it can give fruits unlimitedly. So when you get to the spiritual world, if you want a cream bun, you can go up to a desire tree. But Prabhupada said, it's not that we have some desire to fulfill, but sometimes they want to please Krishna, then they have some desire. So they might take, can I have a mango? I want to offer it to Krishna. They're not thinking, great, we're in the spiritual world. And then Krishna's having these pastimes, and you're sitting there with a big mound of mangoes and coconuts and all sorts of things going on, and veggie burgers or whatever else you might bring with you to the spiritual world. So the wish-fulfilling trees are not simply there just for us to gorge on, but they're there for the fulfillment of Krishna's pastimes. And because Krishna's in the center, then the devotees only want something to offer to Krishna. So in the material world, we have so many desires, unlimited desires, which lead us from birth to birth. Srila Prabhupada explains that Maya gives the living into an idea, and then they spend their whole life chasing that idea, just an idea. And sometimes we see people making great endeavors for something, we think, well, why are they wasting their time doing that? But they could similarly look at us and see the same thing. We see other people's Maya, but we don't see our own Maya. This is the nature of it. Just like sometimes in the theatres, they have hypnotists getting people to do crazy things they're not so aware of, and they think it's normal. Like eating an onion, thinking it's an apple, and everyone's laughing at them. And they're thinking, what are you laughing at? I'm just sitting here eating an apple. And then they take them out of the trance, and then they realize what they've been doing. So sometimes this is what happens. The spiritual master, he can take us out of this trance of Maya, and he helps us to realize, what am I doing? I thought I was enjoying there, but I'm not. I'm actually suffering. Just like the camel's eating the thorns, and this is a fact. Camels eat thorns, and they think, these thorns taste very nice and juicy. And what are they tasting? They're tasting the blood of their own tongue and their own mouth, and saying, very nice. Nice taste. But so we're a bit like that. We're enjoying our own demise, especially when we're young and healthy. We should be careful not to be distracted. But in any situation, actually, be careful not to be distracted by things which are basically degenerating us. The material bodies already got planned obsolescence built in. We don't have to speed up the process. Just like you buy a brand new car, as soon as it leaves the factory, it starts to deteriorate. It doesn't get any better, does it? So that's it. That's what we've all got to look forward to in the material world. Degeneration, day by day. What a blissful class. But the good news is that this is not us. This is something which has nothing to do with us, this body, this world, and all the interactions which are going on in it. And sometimes so many different interactions will bring us to the point where we can understand, actually, I'm nothing to do with any of this, and I have a different place where I belong, and that's where I'm heading. We can take that. That's our choice. Krishna doesn't stand in the way saying, no, you're not good enough. He's inviting everyone, and he's encouraging everyone, just think of me, become my devotee, you'll come to me. I promise you this, no doubt. You become free from attachment, fear, and anger, you'll start to notice these things. So Krishna is he's the eternal optimist for the living entities. He never gives up on them, no matter how deep they've sunk into Maya. He knows who they are, eternally related to him. We may have forgotten, but he hasn't. And he's always there. Time and time again, he comes to the material world to instruct us how to get back to him. So these four things, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, religion, economic development, sense gratification and liberation, they're considered insignificant achievements. Now, sometimes in the material world, people consider that if they can perform all their religious duties, if they can have a good, prosperous lifestyle, and they've got all the objects of sense gratification which they want, and at the end of it, they expect that they're going to be liberated, then they think this is very significant. But here it's considered that in comparison to devotional service, these things are very insignificant achievements, even moksha. So this moksha thing is considered to be like spiritual suicide. Just like sometimes people become so troubled by life, they think, well, why not just end it all? It will take, a few moments and then all the suffering will be over. Why put up with a life of suffering? So we can see some people are driven to that. But it doesn't actually, of course, we know it doesn't actually solve anything, because then you just become a disembodied spirit with all the same desires and no body to fulfill your desires. So you become very frustrated. But their hope is to become free from the bodily miseries, bodily and mental miseries. And similarly, the impersonalists, they become frustrated by personal interaction. So they think, let me just merge. So this is considered spiritual suicide, but it's actually won't satisfy, because the inactiveness of merging is not compatible with the active nature of the soul. The soul by nature is always active, and therefore ultimately the living entity in the Brahman once again falls down into the material world, generally into the mode of goodness, where they perform philanthropic, altruistic activities, because they try to behave themselves. It starts off like that, and then something usually goes a little bit astray. And before you know it, animal births again. So who knows how many times we've been up there in the Brahman, come back down, try to be some pious person, and then up and down the species. But now we have the best opportunity we've ever had to get out of this once and for all. And Lord Caitanya has made it so easy and simple for us that we simply chant Hare Krishna a certain amount of times per day. We offer all our food, and we engage in some service, and we try to learn about Krishna, learn the art of devotional service. And if we just dedicate this one life, back to what Thakur says, if you give this one life to Krishna, then you will see the result. And the result will be that we will no longer take birth in this material world. So here Srila Prabhupada saying that pure devotee is never interested in such thing. His only interest is in perfecting his devotional service to the Lord. Now, we may not be a pure devotee at this point in time, but if we hear that this is the interest of the pure devotee, then we try to also develop that same interest. So just like sometimes in this material world, certain things we haven't been interested in, and then we find ourselves becoming interested in them. So we can, by cultivating a regulated devotional service, then our natural taste awakens and then we become interested. And then we lose our taste. So by experiencing the higher taste, we lose our taste for the material world. So therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami says we have to be patient, because to begin with, we may not necessarily have lost the taste for the material world. In our mind, we're still contemplating. Externally, we may have closed off the sense objects. We may have stopped doing this and that. But in our mind, we're still toying with the idea, because we've cultivated it for some time, so it's not unusual. And we shouldn't get too down on ourselves, just thinking, oh, I'm just a pretender. I'm chanting Hare Krishna, but my mind's going somewhere else. No, don't let Maya take us back. Don't let her put us down in that way. I think, okay, I'm doing this just now, which is better than I was doing before. And in due course of time, then my internal will match up with my external. And you'll be surprised when you look back after some time, you realize, actually, I'm not hankering for those things that I used to hanker for. I was thinking I'd never give them up, but here I am, and I forgot about them. It works, definitely works. And the proof is that people have been doing it for many, many years and haven't gone back to the things they did when they gave up. And in fact, as time goes on, generally in the material world, as time goes on, people become less and less able to enjoy. But in devotional service, as time goes on, the devotees relish more and more. So just stop for questions. Akshay, you had your hand up?
Process of devotional service, and I guess that also, the process of devotional service also includes relationship skills, like empathizing with people's underlying needs. So that was just a comment. And then I was wondering, is the main reason for communal disharmony the fact that it's because devotees that are kanishtas tend to argue more than Majjhima adhikaris?
Yeah, that is mentioned. Is it in the Nectar of Instruction? I think you're quite familiar with the Nectar of Instruction. I think it's also mentioned that Ishopanishad, that Kanishta adhikaris are materialistic devotees, and they often fight with each other. They have disagreements. Or they're always looking to, because they have a kind of materialistic outlook, then they kind of judge people on a materialistic level. So, for example, we may be singing Shri Guru Vandana and someone pronounces something wrong and someone thinks, oh, that's not much of a devotee. You can't even say, what is it? You can't even say, a certain word properly. And some people are actually superficial like that, or they read the book and because they don't understand the context of Desha Kalapatra, time, place, and circumstance, then they may just judge someone on, they're not living exactly by the book. So, of course, we have to follow strictly the orders of spiritual master, Guru Sadhu Shastra. But if someone who has a limited understanding tries to judge someone who doesn't have such a limited literal understanding, then that can lead to problems. So this is why we should understand self-realization means realization of our own situation, not that we have to realize everyone else's situation. It's self-realization. We've got enough work to do on ourselves. Why we have to start working on other people? Unless you've been given that service to do. Prabhupada once said this to some devotee who came complaining. He said, "Oh, Prabhupada, this devotee's like that, and like this, and like that." He says, "Why you want to take up this nasty business? This is the Guru's business. Why you want to take up this nasty business?" So you can see Prabhupada was the most qualified, but he didn't relish it. But he takes it on as a duty to try to train the disciples. Yeah, so the sense of self-realization means that we don't know how long we've got to live. Certainly we should be taking care of our own situation, understanding what are my own anarthas, what are my own shortcomings, how can I improve in devotional service. So it's interesting how it works, because sometimes people think that when they see all the faults in people, that they're actually more advanced. But actually the opposite is true. Prabhupada says that a true devotee thinks that everyone else is a devotee except for me. But they don't become despondent. They just think, I'm here simply by the mercy of the devotees, that they're tolerating me. So if everyone thinks like that, that's a humble state of mind. But then if we start kind of making lists, and some people even go to the extent of making essays or books about faults of others, then that's not going to help us. We try to see the good in others, and that can take a little bit of effort. But when you're seeing the good in others, then you're cultivating the good in yourself. If we're simply looking for the faults in others, then we're exhibiting our own fault. Of course, some devotees, it's their duty to train other devotees, and then they have to point things out. Because if we just don't say anything to each other, then we're not going to simply learn just by osmosis. It's going to have to be like living instructions. We get instructions from Shastra, from the spiritual master, and from the sadhus. The sadhus means the devotees we live with. And sometimes instructions don't come in such a palatable way, but if we look at the content, then Prabhupada urges us to take gold from a filthy place. So even if it comes with someone gives it with the wrong motive, we think, well, if that's true, let me do something about it. Krishna's let me see that. Sometimes even non-devotees can give us lessons. They can tell us something about ourselves, and if we take it on board, then we're the winner for that. Whatever else someone else's motivation is, that's their concern, it's not ours, is it?
I was thinking that the point is that if there is some disharmony, then the most advanced devotee will be the one who tries to look deeper and connect with the person's needs rather than feeling insulted. Try and see what the person's trying to express, and that will automatically happen to the devotee that's more advanced. He'll instead of responding like a fellow Kanishta, he'll think, okay, Krishna's hand is in this, and they are devotees. They're not demoniac. So, what's the need that they're trying to express? I was going to just say as well. One last question was, you were saying that suffering, that pleasure is actually suffering, and I was wondering, because then the alternative of that is that suffering is actually pleasure. So, is there some suffering that is actually suffering?
Yeah. Prabhupada says that the real suffering is separation from Krishna. Because while we're in the material world and we're not engaged in devotional service, we're not connected with Krishna, then the living entity is suffering, even when it appears to be enjoying. It's suffering that separation from Krishna. So that's the main suffering. Is that okay? All right. Anything else? Yes, Pancha.
I just wanted to ask, you're mentioning desire trees, and devotees in the spiritual world, they have maybe just some desire to offer a mango to Krishna. So they have a mango and they offer it to Krishna. I'm just wondering, maybe is it more of a conditioned state to think, okay, I put in so much effort to acquire this fruit. Say I travel all the way to India to get the perfect mango and come back to get the, there's so much effort we put in materially, even just to do mundane things, just to be clean or something. It takes a lot of effort in the material world. And we see that as the offering. But I was wondering, in the spiritual world, is that the effort doesn't really need to be there? Or...
Yeah, well, Srila Prabhupada calls it the work-reward system of the material world. As soon as we do something or say something, we always have some kind of expectancy that something's going to come out of it. It's just like, say I instruct someone to clean the temple properly because they're not doing it right. Then I come and see they're still doing it wrong. I get upset because I'm expecting a certain result out of it. Or, whatever we say, whatever we do, we're expecting something out of it because we're so conditioned by this work-reward system. And it's difficult to conceive. It's difficult for us to conceive of how we can do something without expecting anything in return. So we have to be careful of that, because that can still be there, many years. And one of the best ways to actually experience this is actually going on Sankirtan, because you're putting yourself in a situation where you really need to take shelter of Krishna. You can run on false ego for some time if you may have some good karma. You may be able to do some sales, or you might be a patter merchant or whatever. But for those who don't know what patter merchant means, someone who's got the gift of the gab. If you don't know what that means, then it means someone who's got a silver tongue. If you don't know what that means, then just watch the hoax on the street. He's got the gift of the gab. But if we have that, we use it in Krishna's service. And of course, we may have some motivation there, but ultimately it gets purified. And Krishna wants us to be unattached to the fruits of action, whether the fruits are small or whether they're big, whether it brings praise or blame. So just as we're attached to praise, then when blame comes, that will be similarly affect us in a negative way. So this is going back to Mata Sparshas to Kontya, to tolerate the happiness and distress. Caitanya Prabhu was saying that when success comes, have we considered how we're going to cope with that? We're quite often trying to cope with the negative side of things, and that's almost something, a battle we can deal with, because our innate thing is to be happy, and failure or misery or something like that, that's considered to be unhappy, so we strive to get beyond that. But when success comes in many different ways, then we have to remain fixed also to not become distracted by that. But the good news is that this work-reward system, or this fruitive mentality, is actually a second nature. It's not a real nature. Our real nature will come out by engaging in devotional service. And then, because this underlying desire for some reaction always causes some kind of anxiety, or some kind of temporary elation or some disappointment. But when we finally give up that expectancy that we're simply doing it because this is my duty as a spirit soul, as a servant of my Guru Maharaj, servant of Krishna. So we can adopt that mentality and it will become like that in due course. Okay, anything else?
Maybe I didn't hear Panchi right. I thought what he was meaning also was that is the mango appreciated as much when it just drops out the tree compared to the person that goes all the way to India, So if he offers the mango, it's after a great difficulty. Whereas the mango that's just offered, because it's just dropped off the tree, because that's what you wanted to offer to Krishna, it won't have the same amount of endeavor. So is it a more appreciated offering when it's done with extreme effort than it is when something just rolls into your hand?
Well, certainly, is that what you were asking? Sorry, I missed that. Well, certainly, when Krishna sees the living entity struggling hard to serve him in the material world, then he's very much attracted to that. So I couldn't say whether one is better than another, because one is in pure devotion, another one is someone who's trying to be a pure devotee. Talks to.
The point comes up in Shiv Rama's book, Sankalpa Kamodi, and he says there that in the spiritual world there are a lot of diamonds, but because there's so many diamonds, they aren't appreciated so much. But if one diamond is taken out and then put onto a black background, it stands out significantly from anything else that's around it. So any devotional act performed in the material world catches Krishna's attention more than it does in the spiritual world, because it's just much of a muchness. There's no contrast. Whereas in the material world, there's not much else. There's not many other people offering a mango to Krishna, you know.
That's a nice explanation. Okay, we'll just close there. Iskon Gurvinda ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Shri Caitanya Caritamrta ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki.